SportsLit is co-founded and co-hosted by Neil Acharya and Nate Sager. Technical producer and engineer, Michael Ella. Executive producer, Neil Acharya. Welcome to SportsLit. I'm Neil Acharya.
And I am Nathan Sager.
Our guest today is Mirin Fader, author of Dream, The Life and Legacy of Hakeem Olajuwon, published by Hachette Books on October 15th, 2024. Quick, Nate, let's run through some NBA nicknames. I'll start. Michael Air Jordan. Carl the Mailman Malone.
Clyde the Glide Drexler. Iceman George Gervin. Vinny the Microwave Johnson.
How about Hakeem the Dream Olajuwon? Hakeem was a finesse center with a temper who was part of the NBA's come-up, which began with superstars like Magic Johnson and Larry Bird entering the league in the late 70s, early 80s. As we know from our interview with Spencer Haywood, and for those that watched The Last Dance, the league was on the fringes of the North American sports landscape by the late 70s before Bird and Johnson kind of propelled the league forward into stardom. Hakeem was a star center in an era when the NBA teams were built around centers. It was a rough game, and he could play rough, but he was also smooth. By and large, the nuggets that pop out for most observers of Hakeem are as follows. The University of Houston, Phi Slamma Jamma, their 3 consecutive Final Four appearances in 82, 83, and 84, and the myth of how he didn't end up at St. John's due to their negligence of not picking him up at the airport. Number 2, being an aforementioned household name, a sultan of slam, starting with his rookie season as a top center with the Houston Rockets in 1984-85. 3, leading the Houston Rockets to consecutive NBA titles in 1994 and 95 when Michael Jordan was in his first retirement. And by the way, Hakeem was the league MVP in 1994. And the 4th thing people probably remember when thinking of Hakeem Olajuwon, a man born in Nigeria who is a devout Muslim, and he'd fast for Ramadan during the season, no matter how taxing it was on his body. He wouldn't even take a sip of water, and he would dare not take a sip of alcohol during their championship celebrations. So he was one of a number of stars in an era where Jordan was the superstar. A new book by Mirin Fader relies on hundreds of interviews to pull back the layers on why he was significant as the first international star in the NBA, coming out of Lagos, Nigeria, to eventually bring the game to where it is today, a global affair. And it also, another prevalent theme is religion and how Hakeem came to Islam kind of a good chunk into his career early in the 1988-89 season, and how it shaped him to be a charitable champion.
Through Fader's work and the writing of this bio, it just makes you think about the quality of statesmanship, with something that is not in vogue across the board right now. In the basketball world, Hakeem Olajuwon certainly radiates it and has earned it, that stature. I mean, we could tick off the accomplishments as even further. He's on the NBA's 75th anniversary team. In retirement, he's been the shooter tutor for several stars who wanted to upgrade their skills in the post. LeBron James came to him before he earned his first ring. Olajuwon embraced the chance to work with Yao Ming, who sort of followed in his footsteps as the starting center for the Rockets. And also Kobe Bryant, the late, great Kobe Bryant, came to him when he still needed to move into the later phase of his career and develop another aspect of his game. Now, when I say statesman in any context, you just think of someone who has never forgotten where they're from, but knows where things need to go, and they're respected in sort of any context. They just cross over several silos, vested interests, little tribal groups. They're just universally respected. You don't have to be a Houston Rockets fan to have been a Hakeem Olajuwon fan because you knew how great he was. And that just didn't happen for him. As Fader details in Dream, Olajuwon, for all the success, he sort of had to find out what he had inside in his mid to late 20s, and that came through, who he surrounded himself with, how he, rediscovered Islam, and that seemed to help him build out a positive winning mindset so he could be all things to his teammates and coaches when Houston became an NBA title contender and their window to win opened up, Neil.
Yeah, and as you say, mentorship is a big theme in this book, or as you point out, and paying it forward along with mentorship are a big theme in Fader's narrative. And like you mentioned, it begins with LeBron pulling down a dirt road to Hakeem's minimalistic ranch in the summer of 2011 before he got that first NBA title ring. And the book ends with Hakeem's impact on Giannis Antetokounmpo. Oh, I'm gonna butcher this. Giannis Antetokounmpo. But second time around isn't bad. But as we find out, Hakeem was similarly helped by Moses Malone and also by a FIBA Hall of Famer from Nigeria, Yomi Sangodeyi, who also looked up to Hakeem, or who also looked up to Moses Malone. So paying it forward, mentorship, a big theme in this book, and therefore the book doesn't really delve into the blow by blow of each season or specific games per se as they played out on the court, which quite frankly is a relief, Nate, because I mean, you've read more books than I have, and we've read a lot of books together for this podcast, and a lot of times the blow by blow of what happened in a game, if it's not really important to the narrative, is filler, truly, to fill out pages, and this book doesn't have that. This book focuses on uncovering the human element and the relationships that made Hakeem who he was and who he is.
Yeah, and I think the active phrase Jeff Pearlman, when he was on with us in 2020, talked about avoiding the repetition of seasons, because that's the thing with sports. They play a competition and then they go right back and start all over again and do it the same way they did it before, except unless they come up with something dumb like an in-season tournament. But who would do that? Part of who, now obviously nothing moves in a straight line for anyone, but part of who Olajuwon became as a sports person who had privilege and knew how to apply it actually shone through when he was in his last year as a player, as a sort of banged up 38-year-old with the Toronto Raptors in 2001-02. I didn't know about this and didn't really connect the dots until reading it, how Fader describes it in the chapter that's simply titled Toronto. But he was with the Raptors when, after the September 11th, 2001 terrorist attacks occurred, and at that time, sort of the figurative laser pointer of the paranoid and the credulous in Canada and the United States, it sort of landed on Muslims or anyone who looked sort of foreign as a national boogeyman. And in his quiet way at that time, Olajuwon stepped up so observant Muslim students at what's now Toronto Metropolitan University had proper space for Friday prayers. And just by him being out and going to the mosques, that did a service to other Muslims to be out and be authentic. And that, even as someone who's not of that faith, that sort of hit home. Because there you're reminded about inclusion and not and having the weight off of not having to defend who you are. And that's why we read stories like that. The more of those stories that you read, the more you can identify when a group is being sort of cast in a negative light like that. So you can push back and say, this doesn't help our collective situation.
And just as importantly to that, Nate, I think, you said it, you didn't know about it at the time. Most people didn't know about it at the time because, quite frankly, Hakeem didn't advertise. He just did. And that might tie into the statesman aspect you're talking about. But he didn't advertise these things. He wasn't pushing anything on anybody. He kind of just did him, and helped how he could and never made a big deal of it, which I think is very important. And as you say, that was his lone season with the Toronto Raptors. He retired in 2002. And prior to that, he spent the previous 17 seasons with the Rockets. 2008, he was inducted into the NBA Hall of Fame. So we're pleased to discuss his career and life with Mirin Fader, senior staff writer at The Ringer. Her work has been featured in Best American Sports Writing. And this is her second book following Giannis. I'm not going to say his last name this time. Giannis, The Improbable Rise of an NBA MVP. That's the title, I promise. And that was released in 2021.
Yes, and of course, remember, visit sportslit.ca for our back catalog and links to buy the books. That includes the episode earlier this year with Jack McCallum about his book, The Real Hoosiers. I think our most recent vintage NBA book was probably at the tail end of 2023. Rich Cohen was by for his When the Game Was War, which I think is set in the 87-88 season. So Hakeem was sort of in his fourth year in the league at that time, to give you an idea of the timeline. And just to get three in the queue, as Neil mentioned off the top, our season premiere back in 2021, the Spencer Haywood rule with the Hall of Famer himself, Spencer Haywood.
Yeah, and I believe NBA champion as well. I think 1980, if I'm not mistaken. I'll have to go back and look.
Yeah, it's a complicated story. Worth checking out. It's covered in Winning Time.
Yeah. He's got the ring, so we are factually correct on that. As Nate said, you can buy all of those books on our website. You can listen to the episodes. Jack McCallum, by the way, Nate mentioned a lot in not a lot, but a fair amount. He's cited in this book as Mirin interviewed him for some quotes. And she also spoke with, and I want to point out before we get into the interview, the late Lou Carnesecca. He's a highly respected NCAA coach in St. John's. He in this narrative, he sets the record straight about the Hakeem myth of not committing to St. John's because they wouldn't pick him up at the airport. And Lou passed away at the age of 99 on November 30th, and it made it made the rounds for sure online, as Lou was highly respected, and I guess one of the last quotes of his life will be to set the record straight on Hakeem's life. So with that said, we are going to move on and speak with Mirin Fader about Dream. Hello and welcome to SportsLit, everybody. We're very excited, myself and Nate, to talk with Mirin Fader. I said that right. I know I just got your pronunciation off cam, but did I say that right?
Mirin, yes.
Mirin Fader, yes. Okay, Mirin. Mirin, I got to ask you right away, what about your background? I know you played basketball as a youngster. What attracted you to writing the book, The Dream, about Hakeem Olajuwon?
Yeah, I'm so fascinated by this current world that we are in where, so many of our current superstars are international superstars. And my first book was about Giannis Antetokounmpo, and I felt like it was more about the present era, not just Giannis's own story. And I was so interested in who started all this? Who was the first true international superstar, like the pioneer that inspired generations? And I thought, Dream. Why has nobody ever written about Dream? He's iconic, interesting, beloved. He means so many different things to so many different communities. And I was like, this just feels like the perfect subject.
Right. And he had a previous biography out, right? Which you maybe for some other reason.
Yes. It came out decades ago in 92 or 96, something like that. Yeah.
And so how did you feel like there were gaps in that you needed to kind of draw out for the Dream?
Yeah, I think sports memoirs are really good, almost like a guidebook. Okay, here's their thoughts and what they're thinking, but it doesn't have the interviews of so many different people who played with them, played against them. And so for me, it was like it was a little bit of a blueprint, but there was so much not talked about, so much not covered. And, for example, his own temper, that's not something he obviously wanted to explore in his own memoir. And I think the joy of a biography is really just getting to talk with a lot of people. I mean, I interviewed over 250 people. So, yes, I found his to be helpful, but also, given that it came out in the 90s, there's so much of our current perspective, looking at his story from especially race, class, all of those things, globalism, immigration from a 2024 lens was super necessary.
So Hakeem comes along at a time when the NBA is about to emerge from the wilderness, and we had Spencer Haywood on our podcast a few seasons ago. So we all know the story about the NBA, and it wasn't on live television. And then Hakeem is part of what is the NBA is now, which is, I guess, next to soccer, I guess the most popular sport on earth, you could say. And I want to talk about kind of the mythology now. We hear stories about the frozen envelope in 1985 with Patrick Ewing. Where does Hakeem committing to the University of Houston as opposed to St. John's fit into this lore? And how did you go about reconstructing the narrative of, and we won't say you can tell everyone what
Yeah, I mean, I think that was part of the fun in this book is like this man's nickname is literally Dream. His entire thing is mythology, like what is real and what is not. And the one thing I think people think they know is that, oh, he almost went to St. John's. You hear it every year at the NCAA tournament. There's always like an article. Did St. John's miss out on Hakeem Olajuwon? And so I literally just did old school journalism, called up the coaches, and thank God I got Lou Carnesecca before he passed. And he was like, we never recruited Olajuwon. There was no contact. I think the more interesting thing is in sports biographies, as fans, we love the origin story. We love trying to get to the bottom of somebody's rise. Like, how did they even get here? What was like the moment of breakthrough? And in Olajuwon's story, how he gets to America is shrouded in so much mystery. And there's this international recruiter named Chris Pond that nobody seems to know anything about. And he too has passed away. And so for me, constructing this myth and showing that it is just that, it is a myth, it really started with figuring out who this recruiter was, what was he doing in Nigeria, how did he even get the necessary paperwork? I did a FOIA request and basically concluded that, much of the story is false. And the plan was to go to Houston all along. But we love our stories, right? That's what's so exciting. They're fun, even if they're not true.
Yeah, that's what I kind of wanted to ask. Yeah.
The story he didn't get picked up at the airport, which is
right.
It's crazy. Anyway, go ahead.
Right.
Sorry.
Yeah, well, what do you think's the overall, like, the upshot of having those stories out in the culture? Like, in some ways, obviously there's an outright falsehood, but at the same time, it sort of gets passed along. I often wonder, Mirin, of just about the inherent value of folklore, I guess, is where I'm looking at it.
Yeah, that's such an interesting question. I think it has such a permanent place in sports media. We love folklore and it doesn't need to be true. Like, that's the thing. It doesn't need to be true to be exciting. We love this idea of Hakeem getting cold at the airport at JFK and a shiver down his spine sent him to Houston instead of New York, but at the same time, like, this is my plug for journalism. We need to actually ask questions and interrogate stories. And, when this recruiter calls himself a State Department employee, we need to follow up with the State Department and be like, did this man ever work for you? I think that's the interesting part is I think the story actually is even better that it wasn't true. Right. Because it's such an accident that he becomes this superstar. And when you get to really the truth of it, you see, oh, it's even crazier than you thought. Like, it is totally random that he gets to Houston.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now, Hakeem Olajuwon's sort of a quiet person, but you sort of illustrate his side as a teacher. Where does he now rank sort of among the elder statesmen of basketball?
Yeah, I think when you mention Hakeem to anyone in NBA circles, past generations, there is just such a reverence with which they speak about him. It's like, oh, Hakeem Olajuwon, oh my God, like what he did was. And so I think while pundits and fans may not, rank him in top 5 or even top 3 centers of all time, which is crazy to me, like it's unbelievably criminally underrated, in my opinion. Those that know, that have been in the game, or current superstars like Giannis, LeBron, all these people that sought out Hakeem's services, they rank him at the top of their list as like people that understand the modern NBA. The fact that Kobe Bryant sought out Hakeem at different positions really just shows how versatile Hakeem was and how even the current generation respects their elders and respects him.
Yeah. Now, did you get the sense that when I was reading this, Mirin, I really thought of Jane Levy's Sandy Koufax bio, and Koufax is like, well, I'm not going to talk to you, but I'm not going to actively interfere. And we've had biographers who have told us that subject was like, don't talk to telling people not to talk to them. Did you get a sense that Hakeem Olajuwon wanted this to happen, even though he was going to sort of keep his sort of narrative out of it?
I would say indifferent. I wouldn't go as far as wanting. I think like when we say that he is truly about faith, family, and that's it, like that's not an exaggerate. That is literally his entire life. It's praying, it is family. And so he is completely indifferent to attention, fame, does not care for it. It was really nice that he ended up being helpful, like giving me the numbers of some people. And, when I met him in the home of Henry E. Barando, this amazing father figure, he could not have been nicer. And so I think that like, it's so interesting because I watch a lot of former NBA players flourish in TV and media. And now we're seeing a bunch of them doing podcasts. There is this sense of, oh, I need to be relevant. I need to be relevant. I need to be out there. I got to be on camera. Who's going to remember me if I don't have a new podcast like all my other contemporaries? I just love that Hakeem is totally comfortable in his own skin, his legacy, his accomplishments. And he's like, I don't need to go on TNT to like cement myself. I don't need to come out with a podcast. I don't need to be on social media. That is something that I really respected. And for that, I wanted to do it justice.
No, you talked about the theme of mentorship a little bit, and the book starts with LeBron coming to the ranch, and it ends with Giannis talking about getting mentorship from Hakeem. But there's also the thread ties to Hakeem being mentored by Moses Malone.
Yes.
So how soon into the research and the writing of this book did you realize, hey, this is the thread I'm going to kind of weave through? Obviously, there's faith, but mentorship seems to be right up there as a theme in this book.
Absolutely. Yeah. When I started doing the interviews with some of his former coaches from Nigeria, who had never been interviewed before, at least for a Western publication, I soon realized like mentorship / community was a huge theme. And I think it goes against everything we see in like American sports stories of the like self-made, I was in the gym from, 6 to midnight and I was working and me.
Right.
Everything about Hakeem's story is community. It's like, one coach, this coach, that coach, they literally hounded him till he agreed to play. And then once he did, they all helped him and they all nurtured him. And one of his former Nigerian teammates said, we looked at it as when one of us makes it, we all make it. And so I knew loosely of this connection to Moses Malone. I didn't know, I wasn't aware how deep it was in the sense of giving him hand-me-down clothes. That was something I didn't know before I embarked on this project. And so for me, then knowing that Hakeem would go on to mentor so many current players like we all talked about, I was like, oh, that makes sense because his most foremost mentors were there for him from the beginning. And he learned that is a value, a cultural value. That is something that, you give what you have. Your gift is to give. And so starting with LeBron, I did want to make that connection clear. I also needed some way into the present moment. I know it starts in 2011 and that is like now dated, but to me, that was the present moment. Time is moving too fast. And I felt like I had to show that like, hey, this person's story is relevant to today.
And you talked about Hakeem in Nigeria. He was a handball player before he was ever a basketball player.
I really think that he could have been like a FIBA Hall of Fame handball player if he would have stuck with it. Because first of all, I didn't know much about handball. I don't know if you guys do, but it really is a hard sport. Yeah, it's a hard sport. It requires so much vision and agility. And I could see the way his like athleticism and intellect like really made him so successful in that. And I think it was, again, it's the mythology of dream. The only thing I heard before this project was, oh yeah, he played soccer. You never hear handball. You only hear soccer. And so it's like, oh, wait, actually, that wasn't even his favorite sport.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and handball also is an Olympic sport, too.
Right.
So he might have made it there that way as opposed to other ways. So the dream shake, then, tying into the mentorship aspect, what is the dream shake? Break it down to somebody that's listening to this podcast right now that doesn't know what I'm talking about.
Yes. So in that era, if you were a center, you were big and bulky and slow. You didn't really do anything. You caught the ball. Well, I'm not going to say you didn't really do anything. You caught the ball. Maybe you drop step, turned, faced the basket, dunked it. Hakeem comes along and he's like, okay, I'm not quite as tall as a 7-footer. I'm also way quicker than you all. So I'm going to be agile and move around and be nimble and play with more grace than all the rest of you guys. And as he's sort of getting his quickness, he realizes he can do a lot with up fakes. And he has to because his defenders are taller than him. And then he starts doing all these moves where it's called the dream shake, where you'll get him up in the air, then he'll go around this way, then he'll spin that way. You cut him off there, he'll spin the other way. There are endless permutations of the dream shake. It's not one shake, it's like a million shakes in one. You never know which one you're going to get. It is the definition of creativity and improvisation. And for me, I was so excited to get into the Dream Shake because that is the iconic move named after him. There are very few players that have moves named after them. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Skyhook. And for me to discover that the Dream Shake actually came from a Nigerian legend that people don't really know about, Yomi Sangodeyi, who was like this older player, his idol, friend, who is a FIBA Hall of Famer himself. A lot of Americans don't know who he is, but he's a hell of a player, played in Europe for 15 years. It came from him. It came from a lot of different places, but part of the inspiration was from Yomi because a lot of the teammates of Yomi, even his wife, because Yomi has passed away, told me that he was doing these kinds of dream shakes back when they were growing up in Lagos. So I just really love that idea that like his most iconic move was taught to him by a mentor. Again, community.
Mm.
Yeah. Now, speaking of community, how far were you into the research, Mirin, when you sort of realized how much Henry Ibarrondo Sr. was really central to, Olajuwon's just spiritual journey?
Yeah, it's so interesting. I was interviewing one of the reporters from the time, which is really so fun because a lot of times the journalists, they enjoy talking to other journalists and they really are helpful. And this journalist who covered the team for like 30 years was like, oh, it's a shame you can't talk with Henry Ibarrondo. He's got Parkinson's. He's getting up there. I'm not sure he's even verbal. And for me, I was like, whoa, never heard that name before. And I've read literally every article that's been written. Like when you embark on a book project, you are on newspapers.com. You read every single thing. I've never seen this name before. And I thought, wow, for this beat writer to remember that name, that's a pretty big deal. So I just went on White Pages and I tried to see if I could get his number. And I reached out and it ended up being his son's number. And the son and I ended up having many conversations just over the phone about the impact of the father. And that's when I was like, oh my God, like this person actually has played a pivotal role. And so that's when I began conversations with them and the son reached out to Hakeem. And that's when Hakeem was like, yeah, that's fine if you talk with her. And that's actually where I met Hakeem at the guy's house. So anyway, it's one of those things where it's like, it just reminds me of like always make the next call, right? Like I had already talked to a number of journalists. I could have not spoken to this person, but I was like, let me just see if they have any memories. And they ended up having the biggest nugget that I could have ever imagined.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing when you said Henry's past and Parkinson's, when someone's asked about something so, pivotal in their life, sometimes they get to shed the years just if only for a few minutes.
Right. Yeah, it was so moving being in the house with him, and he's since passed since the book has come out, which is really sad, but it remains one of the most like moving experiences. And like he kept inviting me over for dinner like every night that week. It was just like so sweet. It just reminds me like journalism, it just gives you like this hall pass into people's lives, and it's so beautiful. I mean, it's really hard to meet people these days. And like, I am always astounded by just the kindness of like total strangers who like, for some reason, let you into their house, ask you over for dinner, share memories with you. And like, for no other reason, right? Like, it's just really cool.
So when you're over it and you're absorbing all of this for your book, so are you going up for dinner and saying, wow, if I pull out my recorder right now, it's going to be really awkward. So how's that working?
I think like we did the interview like officially like with the recorder out for many hours because, his son had to assist and it was hard for him to speak stuff. But at dinners, I was just like, I'm just enjoying being here. It wasn't an interview. And he invited other family over. And so, I think that to me is also the biggest lesson of journalism. Journalism is not always, hi, I'm interviewing you. The recorder light is on. A lot of it is like, hey, do you need help with the dishes? Like, tell me about where you come from. It's all the hours that you spend like outside of the interview. Even like, it's so funny. The son took me out to this place in Texas called Blood Brothers. And it's like one of the best barbecue places in Texas.
Oh, nice.
And what are the odds that we go get like to the sauces area and they have a little sauce that has like, it's red and it has the 34 on it. It's clearly an Olajuwon jersey. I have a picture of it on in my social media, but I was like, okay, what if I never like went to this place with this? I would never see this random sauce anyways. And that was not an interview. That was just us hanging. And so it's these things that like inform your understanding of like, oh, wow, like to this day in the year, I think that was 2023, there is a sauce out there that is Olajuwon because he is Houston.
Right. And Nate, I know you're jumping in here, but it's just it's interesting because I think the idea of just absorbing instead of just recording, which he will do, and getting the quotes it paints the picture for narrative nonfiction, right? It paints the picture for long form. It fills in everything around the quotes just by absorbing. We don't get to Hakeem in Houston because I know me and Nate were talking a lot about that, and we do have a question about that. But I know Nate has something to ask right now.
Yeah. Now, I guess to what extent was him rediscovering his faith kind of, I guess, towards the end of the 80s, early 90s, and then figuring out how to meld it with the rigors of pro sports? What extent was that really his critical path from becoming, an NBA All-Star to, the immortal that he is now?
Yeah, it was so crucial. And it's really the gut of the book, and it's the gut of, I think, his life. I really appreciate that religion was not really in his life for the 10 years or so in the league when he was dominating. And it's something, he grew up with and came back to. I think a lot of people like wrongly say, oh, he converted to Islam. He didn't convert. He was always Muslim. He returned to that faith. And it just allowed him to like be calmer, have structure, discipline. Like, when your whole life is really based around, these tenets of pleasing God, this idea of like, well, do people find me MVP? Do people think I'm the best? Am I going to win? These things become secondary to like your true purpose in life, which is like serving God. And I think because he had his mind on other things, he just accelerated even more in basketball because the happiness was not based on material things like awards or rings or anything like that or adulation. It's based on like effort and knowing who you are and having integrity. And so I think that like because he had such a mature perspective on life, it allowed him to thrive even more on the court. And a lot of things had to happen. For example, the Rockets had to get actually good players around him for them to succeed. So like the basketball people did their thing. And then internally he had a transformation. And I think both of them coming together at the right time, him having a new coach in Rudy Tomjanovich, it was like the perfect storm.
Yeah. Now, when a time when he did sort of come to the fore with, who he was as a person was sort of in 2001 in the sort of the aftermath of September 11th. By then he's with the Toronto Raptors for that one strange season, I guess. But at that time, a lot of communities were shaken and feeling threatened. And as a Canadian, I remember what it was like not liking some of the rhetoric I was hearing directed at people. Mirin, we're hoping this is where you could sort of read about how Olajuwon stepped up for Muslims in the Toronto area, where Neil and I are based, around that time.
Yeah, absolutely. This was one of my my favorite sections to report, just because it's never really talked about, right? Like you said, it's described as like, oh, it's like this strange season. Why is he in purple? But it actually was like so meaningful to so many communities. Okay, so this is the passage. Olajuwon continued to use his privilege and status to help others behind the scenes. In December 2001, Muslim students at Ryerson struggled to find a space to pray using student lounges and halls. The university had the Multi-Faith Center, but it was too small to accommodate the 400 Muslim students for Friday prayers, which would have been a fire code violation. One student approached Olajuwon at a mosque asking for his help. Olajuwon wrote a letter to Ryerson administrators asking them to provide students with a larger prayer room. He wrote that Friday prayer is a sacred part of the faith and that the university had an obligation to, quote, assist students in fulfilling their religious obligations. Olajuwon felt, as many Muslims did at that time, the need to defend his religion, the need to explain that it was peaceful.
Nate, Paul?
Yeah, and what did that sort? And I guess also as well too, like he actually helped get a mosque built in the city. That must have been quite something.
Yeah, I think, especially in America, people don't realize people know the surveillance, people know the Islamophobia and the targeting, but to really understand the extent, a lot of people don't realize like banks were not willing to sell to work with Muslim people or to, help them with certain things. And the fact that like this mosque struggled to get help from a bank, Olajuwon just sort of takes it on his shoulders and is like, I got this. And it's really intentional in the book that we don't say how much he helped with or any other details like that, because that would be against, his beliefs. And there's so many passages in the Quran that I saw that were so beautiful that were like give in secret, like don't give to get attention, don't give so people know you're giving, but like that's between you and God what you give. And so I was like very clear on that in this book, like wanting to show what he did, but not in a way that's boastful or causing people to think that he wants attention for that. But to those in that community, it was deeply, deeply meaningful. A lot of people also spoke about the fact that he would be so visibly present at the mosques and how some people were afraid to go because there were arson attacks. There were just horrible incidents. People got beat up, like tons of violence at a bus stop, in front of a studio. And the fact that this famous person was just so visible and so proud was deeply, deeply meaningful to a lot of people.
Yeah. Now, how would you sort of summarize the emotions that came up when you sort of one interview subject led to another when you were talking about the effect that he had on so many people who saw him at that time, like I say, going to mosques, being visible?
Yeah, it's really emotional. It's really interesting, too, because a lot of the people that I spoke to were younger in that era, and now they're adults. And now that they are over 18, they've processed it in a different way looking back. And I think it's interesting when you interview people, you're often asking about things in the past and they are sort of processing in real time, like, oh yeah, like looking back now, that really meant a lot to me in my own confidence and my own self-esteem in, being proud to be Muslim. Like these are things that people would say in my interviews that, maybe they didn't realize before. It's just really, I think when you do a biography, especially sports, you can never satisfy people because some people are so sportsy. They just want all the stats like, oh yeah, the 2 championships. Oh my God. For me, I'm more about like, well, what is this person's impact on earth? Like, what is the impact far beyond how much they won? And I just think when you speak to over 200 people and when they talk about how this one person just showing up affected their lives, you really realize like the impact you can have on somebody and why that matters so much beyond, he had 200 steals in this season.
That chapter starts off as Nate described and you've talked about, and in that reading, and then obviously it goes into his season here. So he'd signed a 3-year deal, $18 million, but it only lasted 1 season because he came here and he was pretty banged up by that point. His knees were kind of failing him. I phoned Doug Smith before. Doug Smith's been a guest on here. He wrote a book about the 25 years of the Raptors. You may be aware of him.
Yeah.
And I asked him, I said, look, I got refreshed my memory about Hakeem's time here. And he basically summed it up he said it was a good gamble that didn't pay off. And so my question to you is, I mean, obviously he wanted it to work, but was his heart here or was it in Houston? I mean, what was Hakeem's mindset in Toronto at that time?
I think there was a lot of difficult feelings leaving. I think certainly on the management side, there's a lot of regret to this day about how all that went down. So I know that his heart probably was in Houston, but genuinely, he really did think they could create something special in Toronto. Like Vince Carter recruited him seriously and was like, we can do this. Like it wasn't like, okay, finish up your career here, be a good positive teammate in the locker room. Like they were actually pretty serious. And so I think his heart was in it. It's just the frustrating thing is his body was just no longer able to. And this chapter was really interesting to report because I'm in the era now covering athletes where they have farewell tours and there's all this hoopla about coming out on top and whoa, how can LeBron do that at age whatever? Mm-hmm. It's so sad to look back at this Raptors season and just see how Hakeem's body betrayed him. Not everybody goes out like a hero. But even though it didn't work out, like Doug said, and even though it is largely seen as, kind of a failure and the team obviously wasn't good, he made such an impact in that locker room. I mean, all the former Toronto teammates that I spoke to were just like in awe of how he carried himself. And he really was a leader. It just didn't translate to wins, but he really did make an impact.
Yeah, the chapter, I went back and looked at it, and there's quotes in there from everyone from JYD to like Eric Montross.
Right. Who used to have a little notebook out to study Olajuwon and like his lessons.
Now his time here, it kind of flows into the Raptors now because the current president is Masai Ujiri.
Yeah.
And how did Hakeem influence someone like him not only to become the first African GM of a North American pro sports franchise with the Denver Nuggets, but also to what he's doing with Giants of Africa and into Oliver B. Johnson, OBJ?
Oh my God. Masai was one of the best interviews in the whole book. And I got to do it in person, which really, as you all know, it just makes such a difference. You get to really understand how a person is reacting. And he got so emotional when talking about the impact of Olajuwon. Hakeem is the reason why Masai even dreamed of doing anything basketball related. He would watch his tapes. His mom, who traveled for work, would bring him back things that related to Hakeem. And he was so inspired. And when they became friends later in life, Masai just could not believe it, just the utter kindness of Hakeem, how he would give him advice and help him. And to this day, receives advice from him. And ironically, talking about community and mentorship, the same coach that coached Hakeem, Oliver B. Johnson, who was also a fantastic interview, he's in his 80s. He is the godfather of Nigerian basketball. He would end up coaching Masai, and he would tell Masai stories of Hakeem and his work ethic. And so I just think the fact that all of these men were mentored by the same people and they grew up to have the same values of giving back, it just makes total sense to me why Masai has dedicated so much of his career to helping other people. Giants of Africa is huge. It started out as this really tiny organization. They could barely afford things. And now it's unreal what they've achieved and the role Masai has played in spreading basketball across Africa. And it all goes back to OBJ. It all goes back to Olajuwon. I just love that there is this circle between these men.
And OBJ started the Peace Initiative, is that correct?
Yeah.
That's the precursor to the Giants of Africa, right?
Exactly. So Coach OBJ has his own thing and still does work all over Africa. And the reason why you see so many more literal basketball courts and supplies and even just leagues and organizations, it's because of him. He was one of the first to actually have, a rule book and officials conferences. What he has done is miraculous.
And just how high is the ceiling for basketball players for basketball in Africa, the actual infrastructure, and then the number of players who we're going to see coming to the NBA and the WNBA, maybe the coming next 10, 20 years, because I think you sort of get into the demographics of that, Mirin.
Yeah, it's huge. And a lot of the people that work in like NBA International / NBA Africa truly believe that the next big superstar is African. That has to do with like a number of factors, including just population growth. I think 1 out of 4 Africans is under 25. There's so much hope and excitement for the future. The NBA is kind of banked all its money, put all of its efforts into having these camps and resources and academies, things that just didn't exist when Hakeem was around, to try to find the next, Hakeem, Wemby, Giannis. It's interesting because like I did a story once on basketball in India. And at the time, the NBA was pouring so much money into India. And they are very much not where Africa is in terms of number of basketball courts and, academies, but they are growing rapidly as well. And so the NBA is sort of like very intent on having this next international superstar, whether it comes from India or Australia, where they have one of their biggest academies, or now Africa. And I think that to me is also why I wanted to do this book, because it's like, look at all this emphasis, look at all this money being poured globally to try to find this superstar. It's not just about like broadcast rights. You can find NBA games everywhere. It isn't about like spreading the NBA. The NBA is everywhere, but talent is not. So where is that next superstar? And I think we don't even begin to have that mindset until somebody like Hakeem comes in and dominates and does so well. And everyone's like, whoa, Africa? Like, what? I've never seen somebody like this. And so it's just kind of showing the link between past and present and future.
Now the place where he spent almost all of his playing career was Houston. How do you characterize it as? How does Houston itself see itself among all the big U.S. cities? I felt like it was one of those, they've got the chips on both shoulders type of places.
Yeah, I don't know why I just tend to write about, people from Houston or Milwaukee. They got this saying like, oh, we're a small market. You don't see us. Like we work hard. And I think people definitely, Houston is funny because every interview with a Houstonian is like, they said we only got our title because Michael Jordan was gone. That's not true. Like as if like telling me like, I know, like they're ready with their knives out, ready to defend. But it's interesting. I think it was the perfect place for him. I don't know if he succeeds in the same way. I don't know if Giannis succeeds if they went to a New York or a LA. Like the people in Houston, like they totally admire him and respect the heck out of him and just look at him like he is royalty. But he also just like went to the mosque and was a normal person throughout his entire career and even now. Like you can find him at AAU games on weekends and it's like, oh yeah, that's Hakeem Olajuwon. How cool. Some people ask him for autographs. Some people are too afraid to, but he is like utterly approachable and it's not this like entourage. There's no like security like you'd see nowadays. It's pretty cool.
It's interesting. You mentioned that. You mentioned just like the idea of people telling you, hey, we didn't just win those 2 rings because Jordan retired. That's a segue into what I wanted to ask you next, which is earlier in our interview, you said, he kind of grew up and came back to his faith, right? But in a lot of ways, I feel like as casual basketball fans, meaning not fans of the Bulls and not fans of Houston per se, but fans of the NBA, did we not kind of grow up a little bit with Olajuwon and then come back to him for those 2 years? Because it seemed like it's all Jordan and then you come back and it's Houston and it's Olajuwon and he's front and center for those 2 years. Do you think basketball fans, North American sports fans came back to him or discovered him in that 2 year span?
Yeah, that's so interesting to think about. I think you're right. For Houston, people from Houston who, absolutely adored him for all these years, they were like, finally. But for the rest of us, it was like, oh my God, like who is like the Hakeem contingent? There are fans in all these states outside of Texas that are just like, that was my favorite player. Oh my God, 90s basketball. Like it's just, he represents everything we love about 90s basketball. He was like effortlessly cool. Like his fashion, his silky moves. He is what we loved about that era of basketball.
Sorry, go ahead, Nate.
And he definitely, now one thing I think Neil and I talked about when we were off camera or off mic was that you didn't get too bogged down in the blow by blow of games, but he definitely sort of had his battle. That was sort of a different era where the center was more of a focal point in the offense. And how did you sort of find the right tone to describe the battles he had with the other big men of the era? Because I mean, David Robinson's in the same division. There's a NBA Finals showdown with a fairly young Shaquille O'Neal.
Yeah. This is my biggest struggle, because I think people that are basketball nuts are like, I want more of that. And then people who are like, my other readers who are like more NPR people, they're like, I don't care. And so I think it's very hard to bridge that gap. But I think just trying to find interesting ways into it. So for example, instead of just being like one game, he had 40 points and 18 rebounds, because he did that all the time, which is nuts. I talked about how like his moves were so innovative that like refs originally thought he was traveling, and you get into sort of like how the refs officiated him. It's just an interesting way into the game without being bogged down in numbers, where you're just like, whoa, even refs had to step their game up against him. Like, you can't even imagine what it was like to be David Robinson. Or just fun anecdotes like David Robinson like was such a fan even after getting demolished that he personally had to go to the locker room to seek him out and be like, congratulations. And Hakeem was taking a shower and Clyde Drexler is like, oh man, he'll be out. Just wait. It's just fun stuff like that gives color to these like otherworldly performances, because
you do talk about you do right. I mean, when you do get right into the stats stuff, there's a couple like quadruple doubles, right, that he had. And just on what you said about the refs thinking he might have traveled, are we, you mentioned the dream shake, are we maybe thinking prior to the Euro step there was the Afro step? Is that
right? You know what? That is so smart. I think you should absolutely coin that. It's so fun. I think of it all the time too when I watch the games. Like, I forgot what I was watching a couple days ago, but somebody traveled all the way from California to New York, and I was like, that is like 20 steps. And I just kept thinking, it's not even elegant like the dream shake, like it's just, I'm going here to there to there to there to there. But yeah, Hakeem ahead of his time. But yeah, as you can see, I never thought about this till this moment, but yeah, like of course they named it the Euro step. Of course they did. When again, that's kind of like the thesis of the book is like, we when we think international, we go Dirk. We think of all these, Peja Stojakovic, but actually like there was an international star way before them. And so perhaps we should not Eurocentrize, if that's a word, everything.
Yeah, Eurocentric can make me flash.
Yeah.
I'm having bad I'm flashbacks on my honors English lit seminars like 25 years ago.
Well, I was going to say, if anyone understands lit, it's you guys, and I love that.
Oh, thank you. Well, I actually did this summer read the Thomas Pletchinger bio of Dirk, the Great Nowitzki. So
yeah.
So it's if you haven't come across it, I heartily recommend.
Same.
Took me a long time to get through it though.
It was good.
Yeah, but it's also, I guess, in the whole thing, State Department, and really interesting how basketball was exported
right
in the 1960s and 70s. And it was just like, maybe we should have done that in hockey in Canada instead of being, what? The other countries can play? Right. Now, I wanted to, Mirin, I want to touch on some of your other work, especially the piece you did, I think, in 2021 about Rosalie Fish, the runner, and her work on behalf of missing and murdered Indigenous women and people. I think Rosalie Fish completed her NCAA running last year. Do you know what you can share about where advocacy has continued since then?
I got to be honest, I have not followed up with it, but I imagine she's continuing. I've just never talked to somebody so young and so passionate about like their advocacy and why it matters and what they're doing. Even in high school, like she was so clear on her moral purpose and just unflinching about it. Really respect her. That was one of the most meaningful pieces I was lucky to be a part of.
Now, that story was included in the 2022 edition of Best American Sports Writing. Am I right on that? Okay.
Yeah.
So we've had Glenn Stout on the program, and I would like for you to tell someone who likes sports that doesn't know about that anthology what it means and what place it has in the world of sports journalism.
Oh my God. So I just moved and I found like all my best American sports, right? There's like 20 volumes that I have.
Yeah.
And so to give you a sense of like what it means, that is the type of book. Like if you love sports, you love sports literature, all these things, like it's a must get. It's almost like it's sad. It feels like a relic at this point. I pulled out my like best American sports writing 2012 the other day. And it's, it's just to get in there is like insane. Like that's why when I made it, I was like, how is this even possible? Because the titans of our industry, dominate those for years. And it's so interesting. You can buy a random year, like pick a random year and just get it off of Amazon. And it will be so delightful to read through those stories. It's just the best of, there's a different curator each time. And so like sometimes it's, Jeff Pearlman, sometimes it's Jay Adonde, and they pick what they think was the best. But it's best is always like, what is the best? Some of it is like unique. Like they'll have random stories from Running World. And it's just cool. It's like the ultimate like cool insider thing.
Well, I will say my favorite one, by the way, Nate is the person that first introduced me to that series. So thank you, Nate.
Nice.
But my favorite story is still the one, and I think what makes it great is if you pull out that 2012 or 2008 volume and, it stays with you for the story stay with you. And the one that I think of is Texas related that I think of the most when I think of that is Still Life by Skip Hollandsworth, which is just a magnificent story. So anyone listening, you can find it online. It's from Texas Monthly. It's brilliant. And you can also, we can watch or read your piece as well in the 2022 edition. So Nate, I know you have a couple of questions.
Yeah, just a few more. When we've talked about a transformative basketball player, Mirin, I wanted to know just from in your own personal journey, what was it about basketball that maybe helps someone develop their self-expression and maybe go on to become a reporter and writer like you have?
Oh man, yeah. Especially from a woman's perspective, like I've been thinking about this a lot. Like we grew up and we're taught to be small and quiet and whatever that means. And then I go to basketball practice and they're like, you need to yell out the play. And I'm like, what? And they're like, you need to be loud, take up space. Point guards, you got to be the loudest person on the floor. It was almost like it was liberating to me. Like it just gave me confidence. Like, oh, I'm allowed to like say something. I'm allowed to speak up. I'm allowed to I'm allowed to pivot with my elbows out. Like I'm allowed to be here. And I just think that like with sports, women we're not encouraged to be like that in society and other places. And so coming from being like an intensely shy person, like I hated raising my hand in class. Like I hated when I would look at the syllabus and they'd be like, participation's 25%. I'd be like, why are you trying to sabotage my GPA? To now like reporter where you have to just like go into strangers' houses and talk to them. It just gives you such a confidence of like, okay, I can go up to people and ask if they'll talk to me. And, it transformed me from like a really shy, fearful person to a more able to speak confident person, I guess.
There you go.
Still working on it.
Yeah, what was
You fooled us.
Yeah. Exactly. We went for the up fake and every time.
This is your dream shake.
Just
yeah. No, I did sort of want to. Sometimes we try to be as evergreen as possible, but this was the first basketball book we'd covered since the WNBA expansion team coming. The Toronto Tempo, since the Toronto Tempo name unveiling. Yeah, it is. I just wondered, how did that moniker land with you? I'm getting used to it.
At first I was like the Tempo, but then I was like, okay, I love a good alliteration. Like it will grow. It will grow on you guys. I kind of like it now. I do. At first, I definitely was like, is that the best you could come up with? But now I'm like, I kind of like it.
And I kind of like the colors too.
Yeah. Oh my God. First of all, I'm just so shocked that this is happening. Like, I can't even explain to you, like, as a girl that grew up loving the WNBA and then having editors tell her entire career, like, don't cover women. You'll never make it as a sports writer. Like, my first internship was with the LA Sparks, and it was like me and like two other reporters, and the players were like, thank you for being here. Like, to even like be now in a place where teams are expanding, editors are asking, what WNBA features do you have? Like, it's so shocking to me, like in the best way possible.
I mean, women's sports is exploding. I think in Canada, we're you know, obviously there's various reasons why we see that. And, you know, before this team was announced, obviously Christine Sinclair was a you know, big story for soccer here, and the PWHL seems to be gaining a foothold. So a great time for women's sports.
Awesome.
So I guess to close out, I would ask you, first of all, how the reception has been. You know, the book has been out since October 15th. What type of, you know, you've probably done a whole slew of interviews. What's been the gamut from one side to the other? Is there people that are just want to know more about Hakeem, more people that thought you should have had more? Like, what's the reaction been?
Yeah, it's been really nice. Like, I'm extremely moved by like the people that have reached out to me, especially, you know, not just Muslim people in Houston, but just all over, like saying like, wow, thank you for, you know, telling this story and showing the beauty in this religion. Like, a lot of people don't. Like, I really appreciate that you didn't shy away from it. You really embraced it in this book. Like that like means the world to me. It's just been really cool. Like, I think because the cover is so nostalgic, it's such a like moment in time. A lot of the reaction I get is like, oh my God, this brought me back. Like, oh my God, what a glorious era of basketball. I miss it. It's just been really positive. And I think what's cool is like, there's just so many, like, Nigerian community, Muslim community, like basketball community, like there's just so many different, like, it's a busy book. Like, there's a lot happening in this book. And I think to hear from all those different kind of intersections of this story has been fascinating, because everybody is excited about a different thing for different reasons. And so I really appreciated that.
Well, is this your first interview with multiple Toronto questions?
I was like, wow, this is pretty cool. I did one. I can't remember I think, oh God, my memory's terrible.
No, I think it was the Raptors show had you on.
Yes.
Blake Murphy had a couple.
Yes, I did that. But no, it's cool. This is one of the best interviews I've had, because I think you guys understand it so well from like a literary standpoint, an emotional standpoint. Yeah.
Thank you. I should close on that note, but I was going to say, what's next? What are you working on? Another book? What's keeping you busy these days and into the future?
Yes, I've started book 3. I can't announce it yet, but my apartment's a mess because I just have binders everywhere. This is like how it begins. Like, the book project is just absolute craziness. You're printing out all the articles. You're entering a new world. It's overwhelming. It's exciting. It's.
Can we get a hint? Does it have anything to do with any of the last 2 books? Completed a new sport? What can you give us?
Same sport.
Okay. All right. We'll run with it. Okay. Oh, that's great. Well, that's awesome. We look forward. Do you have any idea of when it may be released, or is there anything plans on that?
It's due. What year are we? We are about to be in 2025. It's due in 2026.
Okay.
So I believe it's coming out late that year, 2027. So
you'll have to join us then.
I would love to. And also, I got to come to Toronto. There's like a lot of stuff going on there, so I'll let you know if I'm ever in town. Yeah,
dude. Oh, nice. We can all go to a Tempo game together.
I would actually love that.
Awesome. Well, you know what? We're grateful to have you on, Nate. I'm sure.
For sure.
For you too. And thanks. This was a really fun read, and I learned a lot. I was telling Nate that my visions of Hakeem are just obviously those stars coming out in the 80s. You'd see him on posters like the Sultans of Slam and all that stuff.
Right.
And then kind of not like just kind of getting the tidal wave of Jordan kind of just like washing over and watching him dominate. And then really watching him in the locker room those 2 years with, Hakeem doesn't drink, Hakeem's fasting, like all that stuff with the celebration. And I didn't really know much more than that. And I think I know sports pretty well, like as much as the next guy. So it was a very informative. So thank you.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. No, thank you both so much. This was like extremely thoughtful interview. Love it.
No, you're welcome.
Thank you.